Hello everyone, this is Naicker from Spica Astrology, and this is a continuation of the series demonstrating the use and the research into the Southern Tropical Zodiac. And today we're going to demonstrate for you some charts of mundane astrology application, and that's to do with charts of the world, charts to do with politics, and there's also some disaster charts here as well. Illustrating some of the mundane astrology in terms of not countries but events that happen in the world. So that's what I'm going to be showing here in this presentation. And just as a reminder, if you haven't watched part 1 and 2, part 1 was where I laid down the concepts and sort of arguments for and against and people talking about it. And I've also illustrated my personal chart example with the use of the Southern Tropical Zodiac, where the zodiac signs are shifted. You just take the normal signs that you're used to and you just flip them, all right? If you are in the Southern Hemisphere, for events that are happening in the Southern Hemisphere. And part 2 was demonstrating that with a bunch of natal charts, the charts of people and their birth charts. So if you would like to see how the flip of the zodiac influences you and what are the potential indicator changes for you from a financial point of view, a career point of view, you can just email me. And there's my website, my email address will be at the end. So let's get going. So again, the point is I'm trying to move us towards a conversation that is more holistic in the world of astrology, because this conversation about I'm right, or this is better, or that is right, and this came first, I don't think that's really serving anybody, and it's not really presenting a unified front to the public in the world of astrology as practicing astrologers. So I'm doing some research with the Southern Tropical Zodiac, and it's a process of investigation, and it's open for contribution with other people out there. But this is something I'm initiating so that the conversation, the platform, becomes more sort of based on looking at charts rather than just what I think it is. All right. So here's the first chart we're going to look at. Now, as usual, the Northern Tropical, or the normal, usual chart that you're going to have is on the right-hand side here on the screen. Let me get the annotation tool out. Okay. And the Southern Tropical with the signs flipped is on the left-hand side. This is the chart for an earthquake, a series of massive earthquakes that occurred in Indonesia in 1861, and it triggered a massive tsunami that killed thousands of people. So it's a non-trivial event that happened just south of the equator, 0 degrees south latitude of the equator. And I'm going to show you that the flip of the zodiac still is relevant even at 0 degrees of difference from the equator. So here, if you look at let's look at the Southern Tropical chart. Now, I must say that earthquakes, traditionally speaking, in the world of traditional Western astrology, earthquakes are indicated by Aquarius, by Saturn, and earth signs being triggered, and air signs being triggered. And you could also add, from a modern rulership point of view or modern association point of view, Uranus to that mix as well. The outer planet Uranus can also play a role here. So let's look at this chart. We're going to look at the Southern Tropical first. Here you have Saturn rising, all right? And it's in the sign of Pisces, which represents the oceans, okay? And the Saturn at 6 degrees is squared by Uranus at 7 degrees. Again, that's a trigger point. You also have, it's a series of earthquakes that triggered a massive tsunami. It was the massive tsunami that killed all the people. And you have Saturn in a sign of Pisces, which is the sea and the ocean itself, indicating that quite clearly. It's associated with the Scorpio stellium here of Pluto and the moon debilitated in Scorpio, again in a water sign, showing the massive amount of life that is being lost, because the moon in mundane astrology indicates the people and the state of the people in general. And the moon also here rules the North Node. So It's something that's very strong to happen and very sort of fated in that way. You also have a very strong Mercury. Mercury is opposing the ascendant. That could also be a potential trigger factor, but essentially you have this T-square between Uranus, Saturn, and Mercury. And the important point here I'm making is that Saturn is in Pisces, and that was the nature of the event. It was a massive tsunami that killed a lot of people. Now you may say, well, how is Aquarius coming to the picture here? Well, it's pretty easy to see in the southern tropical zodiac because Saturn is in a sign of Pisces and the sign of Jupiter, and Jupiter is in the sign Aquarius, which is ruled by Saturn. So there's an association, a very strong link here between the signs of Aquarius and the sign of Pisces actually working together here. Now, the other thing you could say with this chart, and this is relevant for both of them, but it's much more relevant in the southern tropical, is that the ruler of the 8th house being Libra, again, an air sign. We're talking about earthquakes. Air sign prominence is what we're looking for also. The ruler of the 8th house here is Venus, and Venus is at 6 degrees of Leo. And that is in conjunct, it's in an aversion aspect to Saturn at 6 degrees of Pisces on the ascendant. So there's a trigger point here as well, because inconjuncts can happen in that way. They can be stress trigger points, indirect trigger points, so that shows the triggering of the earthquake as well, from an air archetype down to Venus ruling the air sign 8th house to Saturn, who is in Pisces in the water sign as well. I just thought that was pretty significant, especially since the Venus ruling the 8th house of death is connected to Uranus by trine up there on the 7th house. If you look at the northern tropical chart, what's the state of the people? Well, the state of the people is an exalted moon, really close to the 9th house cusp. Trining the ascendant, I'm not sure people felt exalted, but you could say there's a lot of the earth moving, but moon is mostly the living people, okay? You do still have the T-square happening, but you've got now Saturn in Virgo. There's no connection to Uranus directly. You do have the opposition of Mercury from Pisces. Mercury doesn't really indicate anything to do with 8th house. It does rule the 10th house. You could say that Saturn ruling Aquarius here. Aquarius is the 6th house. That is on the ascendant, but again, it's in Virgo. I'm not seeing water, real destruction happening. Saturn is an archetype for destruction from Mundane astrology. It's a deconstructing factor, especially when it's connected to disasters and things like that, archetypally speaking. Mars, the ruler of the 8th house, is in Aries in the 8th house, not really connected to anything. Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess you could say that Mars is, at the nodal, the square in the nodal axis, but again, it's not connected by degree to anything really specific in the chart that I can see. It's connected to Sun, but it doesn't really indicate the event so much. Okay, so something to think about, something to look at. But in my opinion, the southern tropical fits more, the state of the moon debilitated, Pisces with Saturn rising, connected to Jupiter in the 12th house, Aquarius, triggering the earthquake, Venus ruler of the 8th house in the same degree as Saturn, involved in that T-square, just makes it a little bit more prominent for me, personally speaking. Okay. Remember, Saturn also rules the 8th house here by exaltation, but that's a different topic. Okay, so let's look at the next chart. This is an earthquake that happened also in Indonesia in December 2018, following the partial collapse of a volcano. 400 plus people were killed, and it's 1 degree south of the equator. So let's see. Now it's a tsunami again, but it's following the partial collapse of a volcano. So if we look here, again, we're going to have Aquarius rising, and that takes us straight away to Uranus, which is in an air sign, which is square the nodal axis, okay, which is also connected to the moon by degree, and the moon rules the sixth house stellium. Here you have Saturn in Cancer, which is debilitated. It is connected to planets, to Neptune in the eighth house. So you could say that Uranus is strong, the moon is connected to Uranus, and that's important because Uranus has connection to the ascendant by association with Aquarius. And Uranus at the degree, by degree, is in the nodal axis. Uranus connected to the ascendant and the moon, and the nodal axis is extremely, extremely powerful. Now, you could also say in the northern tropical chart, we could have Leo rising, the sun is in Capricorn. Uranus is in Aries. Perhaps you could say that that connection is showing the particle act of the volcano. Perhaps you could say that. But Uranus moves very slowly. The moon connected to Uranus in an air sign. You see, I think the collapse is shown more appropriately by the moon in a fire sign connected to Uranus here. Whereas here you have Uranus in Aries connected to the moon in an air sign. I'm not quite sure if that, would fit the bill, but we can certainly think about it. Now, the obvious factor here for me is that Saturn, or the sun, the rule of the ascendant, must also indicate the nature of the event. That's like a basic rule in mundane astrology. So another important factor here with the southern tropical chart is that the rule of the eighth house, which is Virgo here, the ruler of that is Mercury, and Mercury is 10 degrees, it is connected to 11 degrees the ascendant, very, very directly. And it's conjunct Jupiter, who rules the moon, the people, so that is showing also loss of life that has happened. Okay, very strong ruler of the eighth house here, very strong influence. Here, the ruler of the eighth house is Jupiter in Sagittarius, connected to Mercury, the ruler of the moon. So whichever way we look at it, this way, I mean, we can't use the Jupiter-Mercury conjunction here to distinguish between the two zodiacs, really, because it's neither here nor there. The one goes up, the other one goes down. But the deciding factor for me is the nature of the event, the ascendant and its ruler, and the moon, okay? So those are the important things in mundane astrology, looking at an event chart. The ascendant is ruler and the moon. And here you have the ascendant, which is Aquarius, is ruled by Saturn, which is in Cancer, all right, indicating something destructive in the water, all right? And that is ruled by the moon, which is in Sagittarius, and it's a fire sign triggered to Uranus, and an air sign that's also connected to the ascendant, if you're using modern rulerships. And for global events, I would use associations like that. It is connected to the moon, it is square the bendings. I mean, it's quite triggered here with the moon moving there to connect to the Uranus point very strongly. Okay. Here's another chart of a mundane event. This is a terrorist attack that happened in March 2019 in New Zealand, Christchurch, New Zealand, where about 49 people were killed and 20 were injured. It's been the deadliest sort of terrorist attack in New Zealand since 1943. There was another one in the 70s, but it was a different cause. So if we look at the chart in the southern tropical, you've got Sagittarius rising. Again, remember I said the ascendant and its ruler are important. Okay, so Sagittarius rising, showing that the nature of the event is about, philosophy, religion, some belief, some cause, some faith issue. All right. Jupiter is in detriment, and Jupiter is in Gemini, connected to the midheaven. So the activity is, people have a belief that is anti-establishment. Jupiter is in Gemini, away from his home, and that has a square aspect to the midheaven, causing some stress on the matter of action, praxis, the midheaven point. Now, if we look at the midheaven here, so the believers are anti-establishment, they're anti the establishment in New Zealand. Okay, so you also have, so that's one stress point. The other point here is that if you look at the midheaven, it has an exalted Mercury there. Exalted Mercury. Mercury rules the seventh house of the people that are the opposition, the people that are potential enemies. Okay, they are very strong, and those people that are the enemies, they are feeling exalted, okay, in their cause. And the Mercury here is conjunct the Sun, who rules the ninth house of belief by determination in the chart. So the Sun rules the ninth house. It is Leo on the ninth house. It's an identity, how they identify with their belief, the Leo ninth house signification coming through. That is connected with an exalted Mercury, which is on the midheaven, which is squaring the ruler of the chart. That is very, very strong as a statement of belief falling into action in an oppositional point of view. And the other thing is that it was claimed by, Islamic terrorist groups, and Venus, traditionally in astrology, here on the ninth house cusp, Venus does indicate Islam, so as a religion. Now, if you look at the nature of the people, you have the eighth house containing the Saturn in detriment, okay? You have the eighth house here being ruled by the moon, the people, the moon is in detriment. So the loss is to the people. There's some sorrow that is being accommodated. That is the state of the moon in this chart. If you look at the northern tropical version of the chart, okay, the nature of the ascendant is Gemini, so the nature of the event is something media, I suppose it was broadcast all over the media, you could put it that way. Mercury is in Pisces on the midheaven, conjunct the Sun, the ruler of the third house, squared by Jupiter in Sagittarius. I mean, Jupiter in Sagittarius is good dignity. It's in the establishment, okay, ruling the midheaven. The ninth house ruler is nowhere involved with the matters that are angular. You know, the ninth house ruler is Uranus, that's not connected to any of the angles in any way or their rulers. Saturn is not connected to the angles or any of their rulers in any way, if we want to take Saturn as a traditional ruler of the ninth house. So that doesn't really, fit for me as such, because when you look at the place of action, that's what's hot. It's not really Pisces. I mean, you could maybe say it's a religious event, and Pisces is about faith and Christ and those archetypes, sure, but it doesn't really describe the nature of the event. The moon in Cancer doesn't represent the people at all in that state. People were suffering. People were, the sorrow that was there in the community is not reflected here by the Cancer moon, in my opinion. So I don't think the northern tropical here reflects the nature of the event as strongly and as obviously as southern tropical. If you flip the signs, it's much clearer what's happening here on the midheaven, much clearer. Now, here's something that, now we're moving into ingress charts. So an ingress chart for the sun, in this case, the sun in Aries, is when the sun moves into tropical Aries, we draw a chart for a location, like a capital city of a country, to see what the nature of the year will be for the country, all right? So that's a fundamental technique in mundane astrology. And what I'm proposing here is that Aries, because that's spring, archetypally, seasonally, directionally, days are beginning to get longer. That starts in the southern hemisphere at the end of September. It doesn't happen in March, at the end of March. So what I'm saying is that the Aries Ingress chart for countries in the southern hemisphere happens in September. And that is the Aries Ingress chart to be used for them. So here's a technique I'm going to illustrate with you. On the left, on the right-hand side, I've got here the northern tropical, the normal Aries Ingress in March that happens, okay? So the sun is at 0 degrees of Aries. And here I've cast the chart flipped zodiacally to show the Aries Ingress in the southern hemisphere occurring in September 2018 for South Africa's capital, executive capital, Pretoria. And the sun here you'll see is at 0 degrees of Aries as well. So, some rules about the mundane chart of the Aries Ingress. Mars becomes important because Mars rules the sun, okay? And that will tell you what's happening with leadership, existing leadership, you know. The action leadership is taken will be shown by, you know, and the government will be shown by the midheaven and its ruler, okay? Those are two very basic, simple things that are happening, you know, the leadership. So let's look at the sun. So what happened in, so this chart is still valid for South Africa, September 2018 to September 2019, all right? Whereas this one has surpassed March 2018 to March 2019. So let's look at the southern tropical chart. First of all, the sun is conjunct Mercury. Mercury, and they're both trining the midheaven. So something about Mercury is going to become important, and Mercury rules the 4th house, Mercury rules the 8th house. One of the things that the country is dealing with is the issue of land appropriation with or without compensation policy. So policy regarding land reform and whether to compensate people for that or not is very obviously shown by that Mercury ruling the 4th house and the 8th house, and it's with the sun trining the place of the midheaven, the action the government has to be concerned with going forward. Now, the sun is in Aries, and the ruler of the sun, Mars, is in Leo. So we are seeing here that what's happening with the government, what's happening with the leader of the country. The leader of the country is with the South Node. That shows that the leadership is changing. Because the South Node is an archetype for like a void in the chart. It's like a vacuum. It's like, you know, whatever's there disappears. And that is what happened. Now, we had a President, Jacob Zuma, who was known for corruption and scandals, and he was basically replaced by somebody new. We had a change of leadership that happened, and that is very, very clearly shown here with the ruler of the Mars, ruler of the sun, the ruler of the Ingress is with the South Node in the sign of Leo, showing that it's a change, really a change of government, you know, leadership. And also what I would say here is to add to that, when the sun ingressed into Leo in February in the southern hemisphere, so in February 2019, when the sun ingressed into southern tropical Leo, the sign where the Mars South Node is, that is when, in that time, in that month, that is when he was replaced. He had a public announcement, and Valentine's Day was when it happened, okay? So that was quite interesting, and you can see that the square to Venus is there. Okay, so that's important. That's very clear. That's what's happening with the country. You can also see that Aquarius is rising here, all right? And Saturn is in Cancer, again showing the issue about land. So in the southern hemisphere, we are having a transit of Cancer Saturn, not a transit of Capricorn Saturn. Our governments are not devolving and breaking up, and hierarchies are not being overturned and things. That's all happening in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, we are going through Saturn and Cancer issues. In South Africa, that's to do with the land, ancestral issues with the land. There's all those claims that are going on, and people are feeling the sense of, I need to have what was taken away from me, you know, the sense of detriment of Saturn there. And there are elements in the country that want to just grab the land and take the land by force and, you know, without appropriation to people. And it's something that needs to be looked at more carefully. And so you can see that the other ruler of the ascendant, the Uranus, is in the 9th house cusp in Scorpio. So the real important thing for the year is about, well, what is going to be the law about this? What is going to be the policy around this issue that the government has to make a decision on going forward? It's a defining time for the government. So the Southern Tropical Ingress chart in September 2018 for Aries Ingress of the Sun is showing these issues very clearly. If we look at the Northern Tropical chart for the Aries Ingress, which happens in March, okay, this is the chart from March 2018 to March 2019, do we see a change of leadership? Well, the ruler of the Sun is the Mars exalted with Saturn in his own sign, trining the Moon in Taurus. That is not a leadership change. So that's clearly incorrect. We did not have that happen to us in this last year. The ruler of the midheaven is also the Taurus Moon. We did not, I mean, our economy went down, we had some stability there, but we really, that wasn't the main thing happening to our leadership, okay? You can see that in the Southern Tropical, the 10th house ruler is Jupiter in the 4th sign in Taurus. So again, land and money and those things happening. But really, the ruler of the ingress is Mars exalted with Saturn in its own sign. Our leadership, trining the exalted moon in the 8th house, we did not have that happen. We replaced a leader because of scandal, because of a whole bunch of issues that have been building up for a long, long time, okay? So this Aries Ingress chart doesn't really reflect what happened in the country in the year up till now. Now, if we want to look at, right, so this is the chart. So I've got this, the Southern Tropical Aries Ingress here at the bottom. Oops. The Southern Tropical Aries Ingress here at the bottom, in the middle, and the chart of the replacement leader, the leader that replaced Jacob Zuma as the president of South Africa, and who's now the former president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. We don't have a time for him, but I've used the sunrise time. And that his chart is on the outside in this bi-wheel. And if you look at the Aries Ingress chart, Southern Tropical, I know it says Libra Ingress there, but it should be, it's Aries Ingress in the Southern Hemisphere. So the 10th house, cusp is 0 degrees Sagittarius, that is ruled by Jupiter. So who is the leader? And if you look at Jupiter in the chart, it is on the moon of Cyril Ramaphosa. The popularity of that, the moon in Taurus exalted, okay? So that makes me believe that Cyril Ramaphosa has a very strong moon ruling his 10th house or in his 10th house, something like that, which would make him either Cancer, I mean Libra rising, or it would make him Leo rising. And I believe he is Libra rising because of this, because he's extremely diplomatic and really takes pains to consider all sides of the spectrum, and he sort of has some people smarts about him in that way. And he's having a Taurus moon makes more sense rather than a Scorpio moon, again, born in the Southern Hemisphere, because he's a self-made businessman. He's made money from nothing in his life, and he's come a long, long way with that. And he's taking pains to stabilize the economy as well for South Africa and replace a lot of the economic downturn that we have suffered in the last presidency of Jacob Zuma. So the point here is the 10th house cusp of the Aries Ingress chart for the year, showing who is the new leader, that Jupiter in Taurus is conjunct the moon of Cyril Ramaphosa. And that's the people, again, in Mundane astrology, okay? The people is the moon. And so he has that connection. And that's one of the main things, draw cards of the party platform that he ran on, was the likability factor, the comfort factor, especially for investors from a financial point of view. So that illustrates the Aries Ingress should be, I believe, and needs further testing, in the Southern Hemisphere in September and not in March. So again, I'd just like to remind you that I'm for a holistic form of astrology, which is looking at Vedic astrology, which is a fixed, non-localized paradigm, and Western astrology, which is a fluid, localized sunlight paradigm. And those two viewpoints of the same karma or action or activity or view on life, they are not competing, they are not better than the other, they are just two ways of looking at life, and they are complementary. In my opinion, they are complementary, and they really are reflective of what is happening in life. And so I'm calling people to come together in this logical community and look at things in a new way. Yes, I'm joining East and West. I'm joining now North and South forms of Western astrology, because I believe that it seems to be reflecting much better. And you've seen also, we've illustrated charts at 0 degrees south and 1 degree south, and the southern tropical flip seems to be a little more clearer, at least to my mind. So, but of course, this is not really a one-man show. And if you are willing and able to participate and contribute to this ongoing research project in whichever way, either by contributing chart data of people born in the Southern Hemisphere with permission, or people that that have been born in the Northern Hemisphere that have moved to the Southern Hemisphere, or vice versa, or help with data collection, maintenance, analysis, if you know statistics, please contact me. I'd be very happy to have a conversation about how you can contribute to the work going forward. And I look forward to hearing from you. And please go out there, try the flip of the Southern Tropical Zodiac, and see how your life, compare that to how your life has actually been happening for you. And it's a call to astrologers to really be open-minded and consider it. I wouldn't really be proposing something if I didn't think that it had some value to it. But the research must be done. And that's really all I'm saying. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And I hope you found it interesting. Goodbye.